Day 229 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. For a minute this morning, I thought the leader of the Trump administration saw my video from yesterday. Hi, Donald. How are you doing, man? The reason I thought that is that during my drive over to the track to take a little walkie walk, I listened to the so-called news network CNN for approximately 90 seconds. And in that news, they said the new jobs report came out. This is the new jobs report given by the new economist that is replacing the old economist that the leader of the Trump administration fired because the previous month's job numbers were not to his liking. These job numbers were also not to his liking, so apparently the new economist is also a fake economist. The reason why I thought the leader of the Trump administration was watching my video yesterday about people who will never hold up a mirror to themselves to see who they really are is because the leader of the Trump administration admitted that those job numbers were bad, which was obviously quite surprising for him to do. Before the 90 seconds was up, however, I found out that he couldn't have been watching because then he went on to blame Jerome Powell, the Fed chair that the leader of the Trump administration, Donald Trump, appointed himself. He is very bad at appointing people, apparently. He blamed it on the fact that Jerome Powell has still not lowered interest rates. Well, Donald, if you are watching today, I have to let you know that no one gives a flying fuck about interest rates. Nobody. When I say nobody, I mean exactly 0 people. Nobody. Just like that Bob Odenkirk movie. The people out here care about going into the grocery store and seeing a head of lettuce, iceberg lettuce, the least nutritious lettuce, priced at $3. I remember when that lettuce was $1.25. Donald, your head is made of lettuce if you think that anyone gives a flying fuck about interest rates but you. One more thing. We are coming up on the anniversary of 9/11, and I am wondering just how the leader of the Trump administration is going to figure out how to blame it on Barack Obama. I wonder if he'll invite the Taliban to Camp David again. What a traitorous situation. Don't forget to ignore the Trump administration. Day 230 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I am just trying to help myself. It is important to apologize when you have done somebody wrong. But there is such a thing as apologizing too much, especially if you are apologizing when you did nothing wrong. You do not have to give all apologies, as that Kurt Cobain song seems to suggest. In fact, the leader of the Trump administration actually takes the complete opposite approach. His song is called No Apologies, and unlike Nirvana's song, his song sounds like shit. Never apologizing for your mistakes is fundamentally weak. And when you combine someone who is fundamentally weak with someone who's also fundamentally delusional and lacking in self-awareness, you end up with a person who is free to hurt people and feel no shame, feel no empathy, feel no morality, and so on, to the point that the person in question, who may or may not be the leader of the Trump administration, will not only never apologize for anything, they will actually expect an apology from you. The kind of people who will apologize to someone who actually did them wrong is a traumatized person, and people who are traumatized in this way apologize constantly for behaviors that aren't worthy of apology, and sometimes for behaviors that didn't actually even happen. So, unlike the leader of the Trump administration, who is beyond any type of remedy other than being dealt with in the next plane of consciousness that he pretends to believe in, there is help for those who have been traumatized and live with trauma and exhibit this trauma in their behavior by constantly and consistently apologizing to others when there is no apology necessary. I recommend that these people continue to seek the help of a qualified psychotherapist who can advise them to confront the trauma that made them this person that feels like they must make amends for transgressions that never took place. Unfortunately, we will have to continue to suffer the president's disconnected insubordination, but we can manage that by ignoring the Trump administration. Day 231 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. Do you believe in a creator? If you are religious and you believe in a God, then you believe in a creator. I listened to someone today try to explain to a person who does not believe in God and does not believe in a creator that they just weren't open to believing in God yet. This person tried to make the comparison to people who have a psychedelic experience like one might have at a Grateful Dead concert while Jerry Garcia was still alive, for lack of a better way to describe it, where their mind would be opened to a plane of consciousness that they did not experience before and therefore would then believe in God. This person and people who think that non-believers just haven't been exposed to a level of consciousness that would allow them to believe in God do not understand that a psychedelic experience might make you perceive reality in a different way once that experience has come to an end after 8 to 10 hours, but it does not change actual reality. People who believe that quote unquote seeing God means there is a God and then take that out of their own life experience and try to impose this new belief on others is the exact reason why we currently suffer under the leader of the Trump administration and the Trump administration. People who hold a belief in faith over facts are why we suffer under leaders who use that faith to manipulate and control their followers. There is nothing wrong with having faith. There is nothing wrong with believing in God. There is nothing wrong with feeling as if there is a deeper level of consciousness that we can all attain. What there is something wrong with is deciding that you know what the quote unquote truth is and that you have the right to impose that truth on others. I believe that people would, could, and should carry out their lives in any way they wish, worshiping in any denomination. Personally, I do not believe in religion, but I do have faith in ignoring the Trump administration. Day 232 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. I have something in common with the leader of the Trump administration. And no, it is not sending completely disgusting, obviously incriminating birthday cards to one of the most heinous predators in American history. It is the belief that anything is possible. I am an optimist, and as much as I believe that the leader of the Trump administration is a totally negative influence on our nation, I believe that he believes he is eternally optimistic. He probably loves the song Happy by Pharrell Williams and would probably do his double-fisted jerk dance to it if his hands weren't so bruised at the moment. Quite often, Optimism goes hand in hand with being delusional, but I believe that optimism must go hand in hand with being realistic. I believe that one must be realistic to achieve optimism, that one must be mindful to maintain optimism, and that one must be hopeful to embrace optimism eternally. The leader of the Trump administration only does the optimism part all by itself because his optimism is rooted in his delusion. For instance, when he was so roundly booed at the US Open over this past weekend, it is a certainty that he heard those boos as cheers because in his mind he believes that people would never boo because booing is pessimistic and he is eternally but delusionally optimistic. But if he were realistic, he would stop and say, "What is this booing about?" If he were mindful, he would say, "Well, perhaps these are people who disagree with my behavior both as a person and a president." If he were hopeful in his realistic and mindful optimism, he would say, "Perhaps I can change their minds through taking responsibility for my behavior and improving myself." Unfortunately, this example shows where the commonality I have with the leader of the Trump administration in our optimistic way of life diverges. I hope that his followers can make sense of this explanation, and I am optimistic that we will continue to ignore the Trump administration. Day 233 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. In 1973, Ringo Starr of the Beatles released a solo single titled "You're 16." Now, I am not going to tell you any more about this song other than that title. But based on what the leader of the Trump administration seems to possibly, maybe, could be, have been involved in with the man he sent a 50th birthday card to, I would not be surprised if that particular song was one of his favorites that he did that ridiculous double-fisted jerk dance to. I am not sure if Ringo Starr has ever come out to say that maybe that song was not the best choice in the world. But we know for sure that the leader of the Trump administration has not come out to say that maybe that birthday card was not the best choice in the world. However, the number 16 in and of itself is not a bad thing. And in fact, today is a celebration of that number, the number 16, because today we are officially 16%. That's right, 16% through the final term of the leader of the Trump administration. And when we reach these milestones, I like to remind myself just what the hell I am doing here. The point of this series is to remind myself to pay less attention to the unending news cycle that will tell us about birthday cards that the leader of the Trump administration has been sending 24 hours a day if we're not careful. That is a depletion of our valuable time on this earth. So when we reclaim that time, we regain our mind and we are able to use those resources, that energy, that positive vibe to put good into the world and to help those around us who maybe aren't as clear-headed when it comes to avoiding this constant barrage of noise. I suggest avoiding songs like Ringo's unfortunate tune from 1973 and instead listening to some that are less of an aberration. Enjoy the completion of Sweet 16% and continue to ignore the Trump administration. Day 234 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I am just trying to help myself. What can one say today as part of a series called 1,461 Days of Ignoring the Trump Administration, other than to acknowledge that a prominent figure in the orbit of the leader of the Trump administration and the Trump administration is no longer with us? I am not sure if ordinary people who do not follow politics are even aware of who this person is, but they might know who Martin Luther King Jr. or Mahatma Gandhi are, two of history's most prominent proponents of peace and love who were both the subjects of political assassinations. I do not condone extreme violence like this, whether the person is known or unknown, but my reasons for not condoning it might be different from others. My reasons for not condoning it are practical. Not only will an act like this not solve anything in and of itself, but I fully expect that the leader of the Trump administration and the Trump administration will use this event in any way they possibly can to continue to try and clamp down on our freedoms, be they through orders, legislation, or more likely, through intimidation, which is their most effective and favorite means of attempting to alter our way of life. Do I feel for the family of anyone who is the victim of violent crime? Of course I do. It is not the fault of children when their parents are despicable human beings. There are others speaking much more harshly than myself today about what kind of person this person was. And while I do not agree with celebrating the act, I do not discredit the people who speak about this person's hateful rhetoric prior to the act. I do not agree with celebrating someone who commits these crimes, and I do not agree with celebrating when hateful people become victims of these crimes, just like I don't like it when people with ideologies counter to mine, such as the leader of the Trump administration and the Trump administration, seem to not care about violence that takes place and victims that are created who do not agree with them and their ideologies. However, my concern is less with the person who is no longer with us. My concern is with the people of the nation who now, more than ever, must ignore the Trump administration. Day 235 of 1,461 Days of Ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru, just trying to help myself. Do you know what everyone on the left and the right have in common? No, it isn't being tired of Taylor and Travis, but it will be soon. For now, it is being abused, maligned, manipulated, and exploited by millionaires and billionaires who want us to be fighting with each other so that we forget to pay attention to the fact that they are squeezing every bit of life out of us into their pockets. Now would be as good a time as any for all of us who are not millionaires and billionaires to put aside our ideological differences, because with what happened yesterday, we are headed down a road that does not end well. In fact, this road is literally a dead end, and why would any of us want to go down that road? It's not a fun road unless you don't like living anymore, and I would like to do more living. I want to believe that before we get to that point, we can find a way, all of us, every one of us who is not rich and privileged, to accept that fundamental fact of life that we have in common, which is being a member of the 99% of have-nots versus the 1% of haves. We can help one another keep the rich and privileged who benefit from our labor and who benefit from separating us with their divisive rhetoric from continuing to co-opt our freedom for their gain. Do I think people who wake up every day angry, wondering who they're going to lash out at today are going to put aside that anger that makes them feel good for a minute before they get angry all over again in favor of actually embracing one another against those who wish to profit off our differences? Not really. But at least I have done my part by offering this interpretation and continuing to suggest that we ignore, the Trump administration. Why did the New York Yankees put up Charlie Kirk's picture and give him a moment of silence? It is not about politics. It's simply because he's an entertainment figure. And when you have a stadium full of people, a bunch of them are going to know who he is. I'm bringing this up because so many people are saying, why not the same for the politicians who received the same in Minnesota? Why not for the children of Gaza? If they did that, it would seem tacky and it would seem to undermine the gravity of what happened to them. If you think about it in that context, it undermines the weight of the hate of Charlie Kirk. He is seen as a pop culture entertainment figure in this context and nothing more. Frankly, outside of the political bubble, many people do not even know who he is. So you might say, well, great. Now people are going to find out who he is. The people who don't know who he is or are going to find out who he is, they're not going to be like, oh, wow, I finally found someone who speaks for me. They're going to be, this guy is a goddamn lunatic. At this track right now, I just noticed this. The flag is flying at half-staff. Now, that was ordered by the president, so this is a public park. I guess they just follow orders. Do I like that? Do I think it's appropriate? No. That's how this country works. President orders the flags at half-staff for someone he thinks it should be flown for half-staff, or whatever the fuck you say. That's what they do. Some employee comes out here and lowers it. That's what happens. That is what we should celebrate. The fact that someone who I think is a hateful piece of garbage, I am looking at a flag flown at half-staff for that person. And they can have that, and I can have this. Most people see Charlie Kirk as a figure to be ignored before and after. If we want to continue to have the right to do and say as we wish, we need to stop devolving into trying to keep others from doing and saying as they wish.